I discovered 3 terrifying true parenting horror stories that will haunt my nights forever. I never should have opened that door. It was a typical afternoon. I was folding laundry, the hum of the dryer blending with the chaotic symphony of my kids' laughter. But an unfamiliar chill brushed against my skin. The light flickered, and for a moment, I felt a dreadful presence lurking just beyond my perception. I brushed it off, thinking it was the draft from the cracked window. My son's soft giggle echoed, but it felt different, somehow distant. I glanced down the dark corridor leading to the back room. Shadows danced along the walls, casting eerie shapes that contorted and twisted. My heart raced. I tried to shake it off, but fear seeped in. Then came the sounds. It started as a faint whisper, like a forgotten lullaby, but I couldn't shake the feeling it was something more sinister. I was drawn to the door at the end of the hall, the one I had neglected for months. The handle glinted, almost beckoning me closer. Each step felt heavy, as if the air thickened with dread. Was that a breath? I froze. The creak of the floor beneath my feet echoed in the eerie silence that followed. I gripped the handle, trembling, the metal biting into my palm. The door felt ancient, the wood warped and weathered. As I pushed it open, a freezing gust rushed at me, carrying a scent of sickly sweet decay that made me gag. What lay within? I strained my ears for any sign. The whispers grew louder, a chorus that clawed at my sanity. And then, a sudden crash, a toy toppling over in the stillness. I jumped back, adrenaline surging. Something was wrong. The feeling in my chest tightened, like a hand closing around my heart. I stepped away from that door, panic thrumming through me. What was behind it? I needed to know, but fear rooted me in place, a silent battle within, and just as I turned to bolt, a figure emerged from the shadows in my peripheral vision. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. I couldn't bring myself to turn fully. The figure lurked in the corner of my vision, a grotesque silhouette, its edges blurred as if it were made of shadows themselves. My breath quickened, each heartbeat a thunderous protest against the cold clench of fear in my chest. I squeezed my eyes shut for a moment, praying it would vanish as quickly as it had emerged. But the whispers intensified, a cacophony of tormented voices that seemed to crawl into my ears. Help us, find us. They pleaded, each syllable echoing in my mind like a ravenous beast. It was as though they clawed at the walls in unison, hungering for release. I had never felt such dread, it suffocated me. With a sudden burst of courage fueled by desperation, I spun around to confront whatever malevolence lurked in the shadows. The hallway was empty, but a chill swept through the room, and I realized it wasn't the first time I had felt that cold touch. It had lingered in my home like a stain, festering. In its wake, the atmosphere thickened with despair. Turning back towards the door, I caught sight of the handle. It seemed to pulse, throbbing with an unnatural energy, and the whispers became clearer. Mommy, Mommy. The voice was unmistakably my daughter's, yet the tone was twisted, distorted. It sent icy fingers of terror down my spine. My heart seized. Was it truly her, or something else that wore her voice like a mask? Driven by an urge I couldn't comprehend, I stepped back up to the door. What was I so afraid of? I was a mother, and I had to protect my children. With trembling fingers, I pushed the door wide open, and the finality of it sent the air rushing out of my lungs. Darkness enveloped the room inside. I reached for the light switch, the click echoing with ominous finality. Flickers of light flashed across the space, illuminating the walls plastered with faded pastel colors. My daughter's once cheerful drawings transformed into grotesque depictions of nightmarish scenes, smiling faces with hollow eyes, twisted creatures lurking in every corner. Suddenly, a thud reverberated from the back corner, and I whipped around. A pile of toys lay overturned, each one a remnant of childhood innocence now tainted by the sinister energy that pervaded the air. Stepping deeper into the room, I noticed the lump beneath a tattered blanket, a shudder shooting through me. I cautiously approached, heart racing and breaths shallow. But as I lifted the blanket, a shriek tore through the silence, sharp and piercing, cutting straight into my soul. Eyes wide, I stumbled back, finding the air thick with the scent of rot and despair. It was just a broken doll. Yet inside, gnawed at by shadows, was something more, a seed of horror fully sprouted. Its eyes were hollow, and a gaping mouth seemed to leer at me. "Daddy said to keep it safe," a breath-like whisper drifted, familiar yet chilling. It was my son's voice. "He needs the other one." Turning towards the sound, I felt clammy fingers wrap around my ankle. My vision tunneled, and I screamed, only to have my voice swallowed by the growing tide of whispers. This time, they weren't just in my mind. Shadows blossomed around me, solidifying into shapes of children, pale, emaciated, their skin stretched tight over bony limbs, their eyes pools of darkness reflecting my own horror back at me. "Caught, caught, caught," they chanted, closing in. The room shifted, walls throbbing, breathing, pulsating. I felt my sanity unraveling, each fleeting grasp on reality unraveling like the fraying edges of a worn-out quilt. Terror surged through me, my instinct screamed to run, to flee, but my feet were frozen in place, and just as the whispers crescendoed into a symphonic wail, a figure loomed larger than the rest. It moved like liquid shadows, twisting and breathing inhumanity. The stench of decay sharpened, suffocating me, as it reached towards me with fingers that stretched impossibly long, eager to pull me into its darkness. Then, in a split second, everything went black. The silence was deafening, followed by a sudden bright light. I blinked, my heart racing as reality shattered around me, and I found myself standing in the living room, the door closed, the children's laughter ringing out again, vibrant and innocent as if nothing had happened. I touched my chest, feeling the wild beat, the sweat on my brow. But another chill whispered across my spine, whispering a dark promise. The darkness was not gone, it was waiting. Before I could comprehend the enormity of that thought, I heard it again, a faint knock from behind the door I had just closed. The soft, childish voice drifted through, familiar but saturated with an unearthly echo. "Mommy, let me in." As dread settled like a fog, I realized with horror that something had come through the door. With trembling hands, I turned the knob, compelled to confront whatever lay beyond. But the last echo of laughter faded into something far more sinister, the unmistakable whisper of a child asking for help, darkened by unseen terrors surrounding my home. And just then, the door flew open on its own, plunging me back into the black abyss. As the door swung wide, it revealed not an empty hallway but a living shadow that coiled around the threshold like a serpent poised to strike. The air was thick with a rancid odor, a mix of mildew and something acrid that clawed at my throat. "Mommy!" rang out that familiar voice again, yet it held a tremor of something darker, something that turned the word into a haunting plea. Shadows flickered at the edges of my vision, warping beneath the dim light of the hallway. My instinct screamed to slam the door shut, but my body was paralyzed, as if caught in some unseen trap. The darkness lunged forward, licking at my feet like a child desperate for comfort. I felt a tug at my heart, the mother's urge to reach out, to provide solace even amidst the chaos. But then the shadows parted, revealing the specter of my daughter. Her form was transparent, flickering like an old film reel caught in a broken projector, and her eyes, those once lively pools of blue, were now voids that swallowed light. "Help me!" she cried, but the sound was tortured, warped, as though too many entities clamored to escape her lips. "Charlie?" I whispered, reaching out. My voice trembled and wavered, away from the safety of her name. But my daughter did not respond, instead, an unnatural wind gusted through the room, filling it with whispers, thousands of them overlapping each other in a chaotic symphony of cries and screams. My thoughts raced, trying to piece together fragments of reality that shattered with every new echo. What have they done to you? I felt tears prick at my eyes, a mix of terror and sorrow swelling within me. This was no mere haunting, it was a malevolent seed planted within my child, growing aching to be fed by despair. Suddenly, the shadows rippled, and out from the darkness she emerged, their father, a twisted caricature of the man I loved. His eyes glinted with an otherworldly flame beneath the sheen of malevolence, and his smile warped into something grotesque, both comforting and frightening. "You summoned us, my dear," he said, voice smooth yet discordant. "You couldn't resist their call." A chill ran through me. I had heard the warnings: never call upon the shadows, never seek the lost. I had been too caught up in my own struggles to heed those words. Get away from her. From whom? He laughed, a throaty sound that dripped faux affection. This is your daughter, and yet she is so much more. Tethered to her is a power you cannot comprehend. He gestured behind him, and the darkness rippled in response. Hundreds of faces, distorted and twisted in expressions of anguish, surged forward, clawing at me as I stumbled back. No. I refuse to let you take her. My voice shook with desperate conviction. I reached for my daughter's hand, but it slipped through like smoke. Her form flickered violently, lost within layers of darkness. I felt a weight pressing down on my chest, an entity seeking to smother me completely. "Charlie!" I screamed, my hand outstretched in defeat, but everything I grasped continued to slip away as more spectral hands reached for me. "No one escapes the yearning," her father echoed, his laughter echoing around me, bouncing off the thick walls of darkness. "Not anymore." The chilling sound of my children's laughter wafted through the air, taunting me from beyond. They echoed from the shadows, their voices forming a melody one I had once cherished but now fractured into a symphony of despair. Then, a low growl emerged from farthest reaches of the darkened hallway, a sound that made my blood run cold. It drew closer, lurking beneath the raucous cries, and suddenly, everything silenced. The shadows divided, revealing a creature too large for the confines of my home, eyes glowing with a hunger that transcended the mortal realm. I felt short of breath, panic clawing at my throat, as its maw opened wider, revealing rows of serrated teeth dripping with a darkness darker than night itself. With renewed urgency, I tried to yank my daughter back to the light, but as I collided with the barrier of shadows, pain surged through me, and I stumbled, falling to the ground. In that moment of vulnerability, I glimpsed my son through the layers of darkness, his wide eyes shining with unspoken terror. "Mommy!" he cried, voice so unlike his own, but the connection felt so potently raw. Before I could articulate my desire to save him, a hand, the twisted claw of darkness, lunged at me, snatching my wrist in a grip that felt like ice, paralyzing me. The creature loomed over the threshold, and with impatience, it lowered its mouth towards me. "One of them will pay," it hissed, and in that terrible moment, the world shattered around me into fragments of screams and shadow. But through the unfolding chaos, a spark ignited within. The undeniable urge to fight for my children surged through my veins, fueling a roar of defiance. I would not let them take what was mine. With the last whisper of hope clinging to my heart, I wrenched myself free, bolting into the depths of the darkness, desperate to save my children before the shadows consumed us all. And just then, the shadows rippled and began to laugh softly at first, then building into a horrid crescendo that echoed through the void. "Welcome home," they sang, as tendrils of darkness began to bind me once more, wrapping around my arms and legs, dragging me deeper into the abyss. The last sensation I felt before being enveloped was the crushing knowledge: something was waiting. Waiting to decide who would be sacrificed. The darkness swallowed me whole, a cold embrace that stung against my skin. I could barely breathe, my throat constricted by the thick, swirling mist that draped itself around me like a shroud. I stumbled through the chaos, the shadows whispering sweet nothings of hopelessness. They curled around my limbs, urging me to surrender as they tugged me deeper into their void. In the abyss, the cries of my children grew distant, fading into a cacophony of tormented wails that reverberated in my mind. I pushed through, ignoring the siren call of despair that beckoned me to give in and accept the darkness as my new reality. "No!" I shouted, voice reverberating through the oppressive air. "I will find them." That's when I noticed them, shapes forming within the swirling void, silhouettes of anguish that morphed into familiar figures, the faces of lost children that mirrored my own. Their wide eyes glinted with longing, but within them danced shadows that hid unspeakable horrors. I reached out, desperate to save them, to pull them from their eternal torment. But as my fingers brushed their ethereal forms, they shrank back, hissing in unison, "Stay away." Bewildered, I stepped back, my heart racing. It hit me then, the realization that these souls bore the remnants of innocence shattered long ago, trapped in a world that feasted on their despair. The shadows seeking to bind me morphed into familiar figures, twisting the loved ones I had lost into grotesque parodies of who they once were. My husband lurked among them, his expression twisted into one of torment, his mouth a silent scream. "Help us," he pleaded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "No." I cried, wrapping my arms around my head as if to block out the sight. I couldn't look at him. Not when his image was repulsive and tragic. I turned, feeling the weight of 1,000 lost glances upon my back, pressing me further into the dark. The shadows pulled tighter, coiling around my legs like snakes, rooting me in place. I dug my nails into my palms, fighting against the crawling sensation of despair that threatened to consume me. "Charlie!" I screamed out again, every syllable tearing through the silence like glass shattering underfoot. "Sammy!" My voice was hoarse, pleading, reverberating through the shadows, reaching out beyond the confines of this nightmare. I stumbled, driven by instinct into the labyrinth of thick darkness. Then, I felt Ida shift in the air, a ripple of malevolence as something monstrous began to approach. The shadows trembled with anticipation, thickening around me as a low growl reverberated from the depths. My heart raced as I finally caught sight of the Biasta grotesque entity, half-formed from the shadows, with glowing eyes that bored into my soul, peeling back layers of fear and despair like an onion. "You cannot leave," it whispered, voice slithering over me like a serpent. "You belong to me now. They all do." A flicker of movement caught my eye, and there was my Charlie, standing at the edge of the darkness, eyes filled with terror, trembling as she reached for me. "Mommy?" Her voice was but a whisper, a ghost of the fearless girl I knew, now a mere shadow of her former self. My heart ached, tearing apart at the evidenced fragility of her existence. "That I am here, baby," I shouted, straining against the shadows that tightened their grip. "Don't be afraid. Just hold on." But the creature was closer now, its breath hot and rancid, and the shadows began to swirl faster, ripping my attention from her with each pulse of fear that radiated through my body. "One will be your offering," it hissed, voice a perverse melody of promises and threats. "One shall suffer while the others remain." No. I screamed, panic surging through my veins like fire. "Not my children. Not like this." The figure of my husband began to dissolve into the shadows, his broken smile now hinting at a grotesque truth. "We are all one. Succumb to the darkness, and you'll bring peace." His hand, once filled with comfort, now beckoned me toward the void, leading me to my own demise. "Charlie." I lunged, breaking free from the shadow's grip. Momentarily, the beast recoiled, growling low, vibrating through the floor beneath me as I sprinted toward my daughter. I could hear her father's laughter echoing above the chaos, a chilling reminder of what was at stake. "It'll save you," I cried, reaching out just as a sharp pain seared through my back. I staggered, glancing down as a dark tendril pierced through my flesh, anchoring me in place. My body screamed in agony, the darkness ripping its way through my insides, feeding on my pain as it echoed back in cascading laughter. In that moment, clarity pierced through the anguish. "Choose." The voice bellowed, and in that single word, everything became terrifyingly clear. I could feel my children in the depths along with me, trapped in a cycle of horror, their laughter hauntingly distant. The creature surged forward, swallowing all light, and the shadows tightened around me, threatening to snuff my will to fight. As more tendrils whipped around me, one lash struck me across the face, burning like acid. "One will suffer as you watch," it shrieked, clawing my focus from my daughter to its grotesque grin. Destroying all hope of protection, it gripped my heart with greedy anticipation. The realization dawned like a horrifying sunrise: there was no escape from this nightmare, not unless I made a choice. And with that thought, something inside me snapped. Rage filled every fiber of my being, and I roared, echoing through the dark corridors of despair as my fury surged like a tidal wave. There was a price, a terrible price, but for them, for Charlie and Sammy, I would pay any cost. Just as I was about to unleash my last breath of defiance, shifting the balance of chaos on my behalf, a powerful surge of shadows erupted from behind, engulfing my vision in a haze of pitch blackness. The last thing I felt was my body being drawn apart by the force of the void. "Who will it be?" it taunted, laughter twisting the air around me as I fell into utter darkness, knowing I was about to discover the horrific answer. The darkness was suffocating, a living entity that pulsed with a sinister rhythm, as I spiraled into its blackened depths. Every sensation heightened in that oppressive void. The smell was ripe with decay, the air thick with whispers that crawled over my skin, each a promise of despair. I twisted and turned, feeling fingers of shadow grasp at my limbs, pulling me deeper into an abyss that promised no solace. "Mommy." The sound of Charlie's voice echoed like a distant bell tolling, a haunting cry that pulled at my heartstrings, and clarity cut through the fog of fear. Driven by desperation, I pushed against the waves of darkness, the oppressive weight pushing back, chewing at my resolve. In that horrible moment, I felt a false sense of hope, a flicker of light dancing at the edge of my vision. "Charlie!" I cried, stumbling toward that glimmer, but the laughter of the creature enveloped me like the dark itself. "You cannot save her," it purred, each syllable dripping with malice, "for she is lost as you are." Just then, the shadows twisted into a new shape, grotesque and writhing. It morphed into the figure of a boy, his hair matted with grime, eyes devoid of life. It stepped closer, its smile wide and full of too many teeth, each one stained and sharp. "You can't have her," it crooned, voice reverberating like an echo from the grave. "You must decide, or you will all vanish into the dark forever." Instinctively I recoiled, but the tendrils tightened, anchoring me in place, forcing me to watch this twisted version of my Sona, a reflection of what fate awaited him, merge into the surrounding shadows, each moment a torment. "Choose." The creature commanded again, the word a blade slicing through the very fabric of my existence, slicing it into pieces that could never be sewn back together. The shadows quivered in anticipation, hungering for my decision. The rest of the darkness stood still, waiting, almost taunting me with their silence. I loved them too fiercely to choose. I clutched my head, physically shaking as if the act of denial could somehow bend reality back to my favor. "Charlie!" I screamed again, my voice now raw and laced with agony. But it was a hollow sound, swallowed by the darkness that was hungry to consume me. They were somewhere beyond this void, lost, perhaps already slipping into something worse than I'd ever imagined, and then came the whispers, soft at first, like the rustling of leaves, then amplifying into a deafening cacophony, voices melding and rising around me. They were calling me, beckoning me closer to the precipice of despair. "Join us, come find peace, just let go," they slithered and coaxed, drowning out my thoughts, wrapping their icy fingers around the very essence of my being. In my mind, I saw glimpses of my children's faces, morphing and twisting into visages of grief, their tears mingling with shadows, creating pools of unending sorrow. "Mommy!" Their cries echoed painfully, and each chilling scream seeped further into my being. "Stop!" I bellowed, each pulse of my heart like a drum signaling my revolt against the despair. A surge of defiance rushed through me, fueled by the image of my children, pure and innocent, caught in the swirling abyss. But with that desperation came realization: the shadows were everywhere, devouring hope with each heartbeat that rhythmically called out my name. "Your choice is nigh." The beast hissed, inching closer, its maw widening into an insatiable grin that delighted in my terror. I glanced back, and in the swirling shadows, I saw them, the lost children, caught between worlds, glimpsed only in fragments, each face familiar, but mangled by horror, trapped in a cycle of despair that mirrored my own. No! I roared within. I wouldn't let them drag her into this horror. I wouldn't let them have my Charlie. A surge of courage sang through me, swelled in my spirit, sending tendrils of rage racing through me. I could not choose. I wouldn't. But then I felt the unmistakable sensation of the shadows letting go, the oppressive weight lifted, replaced by something colder, darker. What are you doing? My heart cried out, but the beast's laughter rang through the void, an anthem of malevolence celebrating my impending doom. Another broken choice delicious. Suddenly, the shadows collapsed inward, forming a swirling vortex before me, and from within came a guttural scream of anguish that clawed up from the depths of my soul. I was yanked towards it, drawn in by the bright pull of tortured light, a beacon of unspeakable horror emanating from within. The twisted forms began to coalesce, revealing shadows of what could have been. I saw glimpses of other parents, their faces marked by torment, navigating the same treacherous path. They reached for me, desperate for help, only to dissolve back into the abyss. Cries echoed in unison with my own, a choir of despair pleading for solace, and just as I thought I could no longer endure the weight of their grief, I felt my resolve buckling, splintering once more under the pressure of impossible choices. Then everything shifted again, darkness swirling, suffocating hope like a vice. Choose. The beast hissed, anticipation crackling like electricity in the air, shadows swirling around us like a tempest of torment. A pulse of cold terror erupted from the very ground beneath me, and I realized too late what awaited me. With one last breath filled with the scent of death, I felt the ground beneath my feet give way, plunging into another dark chasm. Mommy! No! Screamed Charlie, her voice fading into the cracks of my own tortured existence, twisting into a hollow echo. The darkness thickened until it felt like a living being consuming me, each second a slow snap of the fragile threads of reality. As light frayed and hope ebbed away, I tightened my grip on the last spark of my children's love, knowing I was descending into the very heart of darkness where my decision would rip apart my soul. In that harrowing moment, the abyss yawned wide, and I was forced to confront a choice I hadn't anticipated. Who would I sacrifice to save the other? The fall was endless, leaving the sensation of weightlessness clinging to my mind like a shroud. I tumbled through the dark, my heart racing as visions of twisted hallways and forgotten rooms flickered in and out of view. Some were familiar, echoing the outlines of my home, while others seemed birthed from nightmares, adorned with remnants of grief and despair that haunted me. Shadows loomed at the edges of my vision, taunting me with whispers that coiled through my mind like serpents. Suddenly, I landed hard on a cold, damp surface. The ground felt alive, pulsating beneath my body as if it had a heartbeat, a desperate thump matching the echo of my own. Slowly, the walls of this new chamber started to come into focus, littered with faded photographs and memories suspended in a smear of age and decay. Each image held a fragment of light, moments that had once been vivid, now dulled into sepia shades of sorrow. In the middle of the room stood a cracked mirror, towering and ominously reflecting the dim flicker of light that burst forth from unseen sources. I approached, each step echoing through the silence, reverberating against the walls adorned with grotesque images, parents and children, faces twisted in rapture and horror. As I drew closer, my reflection morphed unnaturally, taking on the semblance of those who had been lost. My face contorted as the childlike innocence of my own Charlie ebbed away behind blank, void-like eyes, and I staggered backward, feeling the cold sting of despair grasping at my very being. The whispers returned, louder now, entwining themselves around my limbs. Sacrifice, they hissed, each syllable slicing through the comforting delusion of motherhood, turning me into nothing more than a vessel for torment. Images flared bright in my mind: Charlie's laughter, her sparkly eyes, the way she would throw her arms around me, unrestrained love that cradled my heart. Yet as every good memory surfaced, it was quickly stitched together with visions of darkness: the creature grinning, holding an image of her, twisted and corrupted. Choose. The beast's voice slithered through the air, constricting like a tightening noose. One must take the place of the other. One deserves freedom. The word freedom dripped with disdain, sliding into the recesses of my sanity like poison, while the other belongs to me. The pain surged within me, rooted deep and gnawing at my very essence. I couldn't think straight, my heart raced at an unbearable tempo, pounding against my ribs as panic clawed at my throat. Where is she? I whispered into the pervasive darkness, yearning for a response. Is Charlie here? In a flash of movement, the mirror rippled, revealing a scene behind its glassy surface. There she was, standing in a sunlit field surrounded by vibrant flowers, her laughter mingling with the echo of gentle winds that swept through the tall, golden grass. But as I stretched forward, desperate to join her, the field morphed into a barren wasteland, fire and ash devouring the brightness. Charlie shrieked, the sound warping, distorting into a wail that cut into me like 1,000 blades. Choose what sacrifice you are willing to offer, mother. Which child will you abandon? The creature's laughter danced around me, pulling tighter an invisible thread that linked my heart to the echo of my children's pain. The reflection twisted again, this time morphing into the visage of my other child, the one I had held close when tragedy struck. The shadows poured through the cracks within the mirror, wrapping around both likenesses. The choices laid grotesquely bare, their faces shifting between innocence and suffering. Charlie, or Sam? The question boiled within my mind like a cauldron ready to spill. Could I grasp this horrific choice? Would I forsake one to save the other, bound in this perverse game of love and torment? I was losing time. The images flashed, the cries intensified, each plea weightier than the last. I sank to the ground, breath hitching as the anguish twisted within my chest, driving me to confront the cruelty of my reality. Then I noticed shadows pooling at my feet, gathering resentfully, whispering promises of oblivion. But before I could wrestle with the depths of their deception, a crack shot through the darkness, a bright light splitting the shadowy fabric, illuminating a doorway I had failed to see. It was vast, swirling with colors and shapes that beckoned me forth, as visions of my children danced within its glow. Mommy. The plea was wrapped in a mixture of desperation and hope, echoed from across this chasm of despair, sending a pulse through my veins. It was Charlie's voice, close yet impossibly far. Just as I gathered the strength to leap toward the beckoning radiance, a deafening roar erupted from the depths of darkness, as the shadows twisted in fury. My choice was close, too close. And as the reflection in the mirror split open, revealing a sight that would forever haunt my nights, I heard the chilling echoes of laughter. The beast raged, the clock is ticking, and time waits not for the weak. Choose now, for light and dark do not exist in harmony. I could feel the ground trembling beneath me, and the voice of my daughter dissipated into nothingness, leaving behind an echoing silence. Would I forsake the light that now flickered, or let it engulf me whole in the process of deciding who would be claimed by darkness? One final push of insistent terror pinched my heart as everything fell away once more, and I felt myself tumbling through the vortex, knowing that no matter what I chose, something vile would awaken in its wake. And then it dawned on me as I plummeted into the abyss: how do you choose which child to lose when both are worth the fight against horrific destinies? The chasm gaped wide, and all I could think was that maybe, just maybe, my heart would shatter before I could ever decide. The insufferable crush of that realization bore into me, and I screamed into the swirling void, as shadows consumed my fading voice. As the darkness enveloped me, I fell through layers of despair, an endless swath of misery stretching beneath me. The air grew thick, oppressing with the stench of decay and suffocation. The shadows swirled about me, flaring briefly with glimpses of twisted figures, dismembered limbs representing the lost, the forgotten, all writhing in an agonizing dance that I somehow recognized. Heart pounding in my chest, I called out to them, but only my own voice echoed back, warped and unrecognizable. Then suddenly, the world shifted. I landed with a wet thud on a relentlessly cold floor, displacing a filmy layer that felt both gelatinous and alive. As I struggled to my feet, the dampness clung to my skin, each contact with the ground sending shivers coursing through my weary body. I gasped, catching the taste of iron on my tongue and the metallic tang of sorrow in the air. The chamber I had crashed into was tightly hemmed in by damp stone walls, echoes of my heartbeat amplified in the stillness that engulfed me. I could see deeper into the gloom. There were shadows writhed, twisting in patterns that whispered of something sinister lurking just beyond the edge of my sight. The hair on the back of my neck prickled with the sense of being watched, and dread washed over me like a cold wave. Before I could find my bearings, I noticed the relics of anguished past strewn about, wilted toys lay scattered, forgotten reminders of innocent laughter now stifled under layers of time and sorrow. A familiar, worn teddy bear caught my eye, recognizable yet altered. Its button eyes glared up at me, a treasure I knew once belonged to Charlie. The air thickened with memories, ghostly echoes of her laughter enmeshed within the tattered fur that still carried the wholesome remains of childlike joy. Charlie. I cried without thinking, my voice a shaky beacon in the oppressive darkness. A flicker surged in response, like a pulse of light primed to illuminate the rooms the shadows desperately sought to eclipse. I ventured deeper, following the feeble spark that shimmered like a lighthouse guiding me to the jagged edges of hope. More items caught my eye in the dimness. A pair of child-sized shoes, splattered with darker stains, gingerly lined up beside what appeared to be a small shrine. Nestled within the remnants were hastily drawn crayon drawings displaying cruel caricatures of me and my children, their faces exaggerated with anguish, mouths wide open in an unending scream. Then, the whispers returned harder and sharper than before, piercing through the air with intent. You must give what is cherished. The bond must be severed, blood must be spilled. To release one from this nightmare, another must pay. The voices swirled around me, their tones singing a haunting melody of temptation and torment. That I stumbled back, falling against a grimy wall that oozed with dampness and despair, and I closed my eyes against the wave of memories crashing over me. My heart raced as flashes of Charlie and Sam played on an endless loop, their smiling faces igniting a warmth unlike any other, yet entwined with the dark horror that flickered within the recesses of my mind. Then, abruptly, another brilliant light pierced the dimness, more fervent, more alive, illuminating the farthest corner of the chamber. A figure materialized, wavering between the shadows, a vivid silhouette clad in a white dress, the hem trailing in a mist that didn't touch the ground. Mommy. The voice that spilled forth was disjointed, tangled upon itself. Help me. There was no mistaking it, it was Charlie. Glimmers of sunlight from her world seemed to creep in and envelop her. Yet, as I lunged forward, desperate to seize her, she dissolved into a swirl of dark smoke, the light extinguished. Don't you want her? The sinister voice called out again, now filled with glee, from a place I could not see, an unseen specter handing me the puzzle pieces of my nightmare. Choose, mother. Love one more than the other, and let fate do the rest. The choice will bring you freedom or doom, and oh. I screamed, collapsing back against the wall, searching for some glimpse of sanity within the torment. The air thickened, almost tangibly pressing, each breath an act of will, each heartbeat a tormenting reminder of my tether to reality. Would it come to that, sacrificing one child for the freedom of the other? The thought ignited a firestorm within me, boiling between fury and desperation. Time's up. The voice hissed, now echoing from multiple directions, taunting, laughing. The shadows converged, thickening around me, a living darkness that pulsed with life. It was no longer just the echoes of agony, but a palpable presence, a hunger that sought to draw me into its depths. And as shadows neared, threatening to blanket me forever, I felt a tugging at my heart, a final attempt, a thread worn thin pulling me toward either salvation or perdition. I love you. I shouted into the void, clutching a frail hope in the direction of the darkness. The shadows recoiled momentarily, and then surged, swallowing my voice. Light flickered like a dying candle, and behind that darkness, I perceived a sudden shift. A howl blared from the depths below, a monstrous sound that seemed born from the fabric of nightmares. Reveal the path. What will you sacrifice? From the murk, two figures broke free, taking shape slowly, both Charlie and Sam, yet twisted into grotesque reflections of their former selves, teetering between innocence and terror that sent bolts of ice racing through my veins. And just like that, I realized my time was waning. I had to act. One must be saved, and one must be condemned. But before I could make my plea, the walls shuddered violently, and a gaping chasm burst open beneath me. Choose. The voices commanded as I teetered at the precipice. Above the howling silence, a deafening void called to me, an abyss waiting to consume everything within it. As I reached for one of the writhing forms, uncertainty clawed at my heart at that moment. I understood that whatever choice I made would weave a fate darker than I could ever imagine. Mommy. The cries merged into a single wave, resonating through my soul, echoing in desperation. And then, a scream shattered the air, not from me, but from my children, a feral wail that twisted into tailspins of agony, promising that doom was nigh. I closed my eyes, whispered a silent apology, and braced for the devastating plunge that would either seal our fate or resurrect a sliver of hope from the darkness. The pit swallowed me whole, pulling at my limbs with a force that clawed deeper than gravity. I felt the violent rush of air as I plummeted into a chilling void, and for a moment, I thought I might escape into nothingness. But nothingness was a thin veil draped over an unending nightmare. The walls of despair compressed around me, their surfaces slick and clammy, alive with the dread of ages long past. As I fell, the whispers grew louder, echoing like shrill sirens piercing through a dense fog of terror. Sacrifice. Sacrifice. Sacrifice, they chanted in a jumbled throaty chorus, melding with the croaking voices of the damned. A haunting cacophony, both horrific and hypnotic. Then, just as suddenly as I had fallen, I landed, not on a floor, but on flesh soft, cold, and pulsating beneath me. I pushed against the moaning mass of what I now perceived to be a mound of bodies, faces twisted in agony and fear, eyes pleading from the depths of unfathomable despair. Panic surged, and I scrabbled backward, choking on the sickly sweet smell of copper and rot that suffocated my senses. The surfaces wriggled under my weight, as if the dead were alive, fighting to be free from their endless anguish. I instinctively recoiled, a scream rising in my throat, but the weight of 1,000 despairing eyes held it fast, choking it back. Mommy. The voice was a thin thread of childhood amidst the din. It wove through the wails, emerging from a tangle of shadows at the periphery, small and plaintive. Recognition passed over me like a cold sweat. Charlie? I gasped, straining to find her silhouette in colors of anguish infused with shadows. The oppressive darkness huddled around her figure like a shroud, but beneath the veil, her eyes gleamed with a glint of innocence. Help me, Mommy. She cried, her voice cracking like dried leaves in the wind. I propelled myself toward the sound, my hands sinking into the cold mass of souls that writhed beneath me. I half wished to claw my way through, but the faces that emerged were not just shadows, they were memories, ghosts of the children who had come before, each one reaching out as if to drag me down into their perpetual torment. Please. I'll do anything. I shouted, forcing my way deeper into the thrumming heart of the horror. But just as I reached where I thought Charlie was, shadows converged, morphing into a figure far more sinister. Sam's fragile form, twisted and distorted, stood within an embrace of malice. Mommy, it's a trick. He rasped. Don't trust her, Sammy, no. I reached out, but the ground quaked, and the bodies beneath me shifted violently like a boiling pot ready to spill over. Choose now. The echoes moaned, the cavern shaking with their insistent chanting. Above the tempest of noise, shadows twisted, forming horrifying images of what my children could become if I failed. Charlie greeted me with a radiant smile, but behind her, I sensed something darker lurking, a malevolent pull that sought to ensnare her spirit. Her laughter, so innocent, morphed into an echoing sob, sending chills spiraling through my bones. Mommy, please. I'm so scared. The world trembled as I hovered between their frightened faces, each one a thread drawn taut, the fabric of my mind unraveling with every heartbeat. That I won't let anything happen to you. I screamed into the cacophony. But the mirages of their anguish tugged at me from every angle, demanding allegiance and devouring my will. Choose, Mother. The shadows shrieked, surging forth to engulf me. The howling intensified, drowning out their pleas, crescendos of nightmarish despair. I felt the insatiable hunger of the abyss looming just beyond my reach, luring me with promises of sweet release. The part of me that dared hope to grasp at the darkness, thinking it could be controlled. And then, abruptly, a glimmer split the void like lightning against a storm. Within the blinding flash, I saw them. My children, two fragile beings bound by fate, their souls caught between worlds, shimmering with a light somehow familiar yet irrevocably lost. The flicker of light began to wane, sinking deeper into the maw of shadow, and instinctively I reached out again, desperate to connect. But as my fingers grazed the edges of their forms, the apparition split into two distinct, agonized faces, both pleading, both terrified. No. I shrieked, stumbling backward as the scream of their disintegration echoed through my very soul. The ground gave way beneath me, and I plummeted again, sliding into chaos. The darkness reigned, swallowing my cries as I clung desperately to a fleeting vision of joy. Choose now. The echoes screamed in unison, unspeakable dread coiling tighter around my chest, threatening to squeeze the life from me. Sacrifice one. Save the other. As I spun into the void, one last agonizing decision hung in the air, endless choices wrapped in horrors unspoken. In that fleeting tick of time, as Sam's wretched form disintegrated into the abyss, a haunting voice whispered, just beyond reach, you have only seconds to save the one you truly love, and then everything froze. The space around me snapped taut with a wrenching silence. At the edge of reality, I realized the terrible truth nestled in my heart. Fear coursed through me as I faced the inescapable choice that awaited, and behind me, honeyed laughter spilled for the sound so joyful, yet so utterly wrong. Mommy. They both cried, their innocent voices intermingling with the distorted laughter of shadows. One teetered on the brink of salvation, and the other danced closer to despair, and then darkness closed in, the choice hanging heavy in the air. In that moment of stillness, I felt its sensation of the eyes of countless souls upon me, and at last, the path I had to tread revealed itself. But before I could even begin to act, the very ground cracked open again, and I felt my heart seize as my children screamed in unison, echoing through the abyss as the void yawned open, threatening to consume everything I held dear. Choose. The voice bellowed from the shadows. I stood frozen, paralyzed in the face of horror, a decision that would haunt me long after the echoes faded. But in the darkness that surrounded me, one unmistakable truth crashed against my mind: to awaken my child, I would have to reach into the darkest corners of my soul, and just as the abyss sought to engulf me, a form lurked behind the shadows, a figure with hollow eyes and a violent smile, extending a hand, whispering promises that slithered into my heart: make the sacrifice, and know love more profoundly than you've ever known before. The final loggerhead of dread settled upon me, the designs of fate tightening their grip as I faced whatever horrors awaited my decision. And as I took the trembling steps toward fate, I realized with dread that the abyss awaited my choice, promising unfathomable terror whatever path I chose. The chaos beyond the precipice of decision pulsed with a grotesque rhythm, a heartbeat that thrummed through the marrow of my bones. My heart raced as I felt the icy grip of despair closing in on me, enveloping my thoughts in a chilling embrace. I was paralyzed, teetering on the thin edge that separated hope from irrevocable loss. The shadows swirled, thickening as a tangible malevolence seemed to spiral around me. Each shriek of my children cried out within a cacophony of despair, reverberating through the suffocating dark. I could barely distinguish the sounds of their voices amid the wailing of lost souls. It was as if the very air was steeped in agony, seeking to drag me down into the depths of hopelessness. Mommy! Help us! Their cries sliced through the air, each call more desperate than the last, an unbearable haunting of love and panic intertwined. My gaze darted between their pleading eyes, the once warm hues now darkened by shadows creeping in like relentless vines. Sam's twisted, anguished figure writhed in the depths, and Charlie's small body shimmered with frail, flickering hope, two mirrors of my soul, reflecting my failures, my fears, and the love that threatened to overwhelm me. Choose. Echoed the voices, a disembodied chorus thrumming through the cavern, synchronizing with the pulsing mass of bodies writhing just below me, whispering their secrets into my ears. But what choice? Could I truly decide between my children? The very thought turned my stomach, igniting a fire of suffocating guilt within me. Each pair of innocent eyes held an entire universe of possibilities, both brimming with joy and darkened by tragedy. The laughter, sweet yet sinister, curled around me with serpent-like tendrils, suffocating my clarity, blocking out the very light I sought. You must sacrifice one. The shadows coiled around me, wrapping my thoughts tighter and tighter, leaving no room for denial. My breath hitching, I forced my legs to move toward Charlie's silhouette, a desperate pull to save her. The world felt less stable with every step, and a swirling void rejected my existence. It was as if the shadows were alive, sensing my intention, pulling back with wrathful whispers, dissuading me from choice. The ground beneath me shifted, writhing in agony, an embodiment of the grief coiling within my heart. The darkness pulsed, and suddenly, outstretched fingers clawed at the edges of my vision, the faces of the damned, children lost to despair, their features twisted in eternal horror. They lurked just beyond the light, rooted in their plight, trapped in a void where I could see the despair seeping through their expressions. Help them! They howled, a frenzied pitch rising, as I faltered, my resolve wavering. Free us! The ground trembled once more, and the air grew dense with the weight of their cries. They were echoes of the children I had failed, shadows of innocence forever trapped, pleading for anything to sever their bonds. I shivered, confusion swirling inside me as the oppressive dread thickened, enveloping my mind like a shroud. What should I do? I whispered breathlessly, the question lodged in the fevered echoes. With a terrible clarity, a figure materialized before me, shrouded in a tear of light. It was cast in both beauty and terror. You hold their fate in your hands, it murmured, its voice smooth like silk but laced with the bite of frost. To save one is to honor the love in your heart, to sacrifice will bring forth another. Which will you allow to slip into darkness? Fear gripped me tighter, twisting every ounce of hope into despair. The entity was a mirror, reflecting my deepest fears in cruel clarity. My love for my children warred with the truth that clawed at the fringes of my mind. Was I willing to sacrifice the one I adored to save the other, my darling Sam teetering dangerously close to the edge of darkness, and my beloved Charlie caught somewhere in the middle? As I reached toward Charlie, the shadows roared with discontent, an anguished wail that echoed within the cavern's core. In my heart, an ice-cold realization. Not as if my love could manifest a choice, perhaps I could shift the tide of fate to save both. Charlie, I promise, I spoke, my voice trembling, I will not let you go. The entity laughed, a chilling sound full of mockery and dread. Do you truly believe you can save them all? You must choose. But before I could respond, a jagged rift split open beneath my feet, revealing the churning abyss below, dark tendrils reaching upward, grasping hungrily. The high-pitched cries of the damned grew louder still, a legion of lost souls inviting me to join their ranks, promising release from the agony of choice. As I staggered back, teetering on the edge of despair, I felt a swift tug at my heart, a moment of crystalline clarity breaking through the haze. The choice wasn't about choosing one over the other. It was about facing the monster lurking within, a realization that wrenched the very core of my being. Then, in a moment suspended in time, as if the world held its breath, I reached toward the darkness, knowing that the tether binding my love to my children was stronger than any boundary forged in anguish. But in that moment, a screeching howl ripped from the depths, like the claws of hell tearing through the fabric of reality itself. The ground beneath us trembled violently, light flickering and fading as shadows gushed forth in ravenous waves. I found myself gripped with the certainty that whatever choice lay ahead, it was one I could never return from. And then, just before I slipped into the vortex pulling me toward despair, a chilling voice echoed through the chaos, "Welcome to your new nightmare." Everything went dark, and with it, the whispered promise of salvation slipped away. All I could hear was the laughter, a haunting tune that promised I had tumbled deeper into the abyss. In the oppressive silence that followed, a chilling thought flickered like a dying ember. What if choosing one love meant condemning another to eternal suffering? And before I could grasp the weight of that truth, the darkness surged, consuming the last remnants of certainty. I was suspended in the abyss, the weight of despair pressing down on me like a shroud, and the echoes of my children's laughter twisted into a mocking symphony of anguish. Choose, the shadows hissed, surrounding me with eyes that glinted in the darkness, souls yearning to be released from their torment. They hungered for my choice, for the sacrifice that would tether me to their devastation forever. In this visceral moment, I peered into the depths of my sorrow, realizing that the darkness was not merely a prelude to loss. It reveled in the choices I had been forced to make. My heart wrenched, teetering between love and desperation. The specters of my children flickered before me, their smiles fading like stars swallowed by the newly risen sun, each fleeting expression a reminder of who I had to protect, Mommy. Charlie's voice rang clear, yet tainted with the oppression of grief that soaked through the shadows, while Sam's cries pulsed through the air, fraught with terror. This was my reality now, a balance teetering over a precipice of sorrow, where love could be the weapon that shattered us all. The darkness breathed, wrapping itself around me, a sentient entity eager to keep its grip tight. I could feel its laughter vibrating in my bones, echoing the heartbeat of the lamenting souls bound within. Choose, they chanted, a macabre chorus that seared my conscience. I faltered, the burden of the decision nearly too much to bear. In that oppressive moment, I realized something crushing and terrible: I didn't have to choose. The shadows urged me to force my love into a box for their amusement, but I wouldn't let them dictate the fates of my precious children. With each heartbeat echoing my resolve, I screamed against the void, I refuse to choose. I will not let you take anyone from me. But as I stood defiant, shadows began to twist and contort, morphing into a grotesque figure, the entity that fed on despair, a looming presence that promised secret knowledge and relief from the inevitable. Then accept your fate, it boomed, a sinister certainty wrapping around its words. To defy choice is to embrace darkness, and darkness has a price. In that instant, something sharp slashed through the cacophony, and unbearable pain surged through me, and I collapsed, the weight of brutal clarity falling like a guillotine. The walls of the abyss trembled under the sheer force of the struggle within my chest. Shadows coalesced into nightmarish forms, the eyes and mouths of 1,000 lost children opening wide, waiting for the utterance of a decision that wouldn't come. Choose. The cacophony grew frenzied, laced with dark mockery. My heart raced faster than my thoughts could chase it. Mine was no ordinary choice, it was a goblet overflowing with horrors I could barely fathom. And just as rapidly as that realization struck, it dissipated as I felt relief wash over me. In place of one soul lost, the shadows shifted and leaned into the light of my love, mingling in a way that felt impossibly right. Desperation morphed into something transcendent. In loveliness born of anguish, I realized neither child needed to be sacrificed, that perhaps the faint light I glimpsed could save us all, but the creature, taunted and twisted by its own despair, recoiled, the very darkness that attempted to seize me shattered beneath the truth of my defiance, a profound surrender of love that lay within us all. Mommy, help us, filtered through the shadows, each voice now entwined like a silken tapestry of hope rather than despair. Then the figure lunged, an amorphous shape erupting from the void. It coiled around what was left of my shattered determination, eager to snuff out any flicker of light. But as despair clung to my mind, the cries transformed, lifting higher, blending hope with power. With a fierce heartbeat, I shot forth, transforming my own anguish into a weapon, directing it toward the shadows that encroached. You will not take us! I roared, combining my will with the pure essence of my children, drawing deep from the well of love that would not bow to the darkness, and that's when it happened, an implosion of shadow and light, crashing together in a violent burst that illuminated everything within. In a flash, I found myself thrown from the churning abyss, standing once more in the familiar shell of my own home, sunlight breaking through the windows, drenched in a warm embrace. The chaos unspooled around me like a guilty secret, leaving only the remnants of evil behind, and I collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. But as I scrambled to my feet, the ultimate truth gripped my heart with icy fingers. The absence which had settled within now lay heavier than before. They were still missing, the whispers and laughter lingering, forever entwined in my shadow. My home felt eerily quiet. Each blink of the eye brought new reality, yet within the stillness dwelled something that struck fear into the marrow of my soul. The familiar crackle of the comfort of television and distant laughter simmered just below the threshold of awareness, and there, with my heart in my throat, I turned toward the hallway where the shadows unfolded. They had not been vanquished. No, something had merely shifted in the dark, their promise of release merely postponed, woven into the fabric of our lives. With bated breath, I silenced the tremor of dread cleaning my bones as I recalled the whispers of the entity. It had warned me that love seems pure, but once bound to the shadow, the lure remains. I stood frozen, as an unmistakable whisper seeped through the cracks of the walls. Mommy, it crooned sweetly, yet saturated with a malice that cut to my core. Let us in the darkness had not vanished, it lingered within the very fibers of my existence. Only now, it had morphed, prowling around me, waiting for my moment of weakness, hungry for the sacrifice I had inadvertently sealed. And in that chilling thought, I understood the true horror was not in the choice I had made, but the knowledge that the darkness remained, waiting, not just to claim my children but to ensnare my heart once more, entwined now deeper than despair. With that final shivering awareness, the house creaked ominously, whispering promises laced with unspeakable horror, ever eager for the next moment when I might bend and finally let them in.